This is Franchise Today, brought to you by FRM Solutions, providers of the best-in-class software solutions for franchise relationship management. Franchise Today is your destination for weekly information, conversations, and interviews with accomplished industry leaders, all of whom share best practices for sustainable growth and sensible franchising. Here now, your host, Stan Friedman, to kick off this week's podcast.
Today is Wednesday, March 19th, 2025. I'm Stan Friedman, and this is Franchise Today. Well, I hope you enjoyed last week's special edition, featuring the voices of 25 movers and shakers in and about the world of franchising, Democrats and Republicans alike, as I raised the question asking, how has franchising already changed under the Trump administration, and what do you see ahead? My takeaway from this exercise was how similar the replies were from just about everyone, no matter which side of the aisle they personally identify with. That gives me hope that in our space anyway, we can still call balls and strikes for what they are, as opposed to seeing things for what one might wish them to be. Now, if we could just get the media to do the same, we'd actually have real hope for the continued health and welfare of the great American experiment for another 250 years. But I digress. This week we celebrate our Q1 Rising Star of Franchising as I bring you my conversation with Stephanie Coppedge, co-founder and CEO of Gideon Franchising, franchisors of Gideon Math and Reading. Gideon is a second-generation business started by Stephanie's mom and dad, who were themselves franchisees of another childhood enrichment brand before striking out on their own with Gideon. Today, Stephanie's here to share the story from humble beginnings to 30 units open and operating, tracking positively on a very healthy trajectory for sustainable growth through sensible franchising. And remember, our quarterly Rising Stars of Franchising are brought to you by Profit Keeper, the ultimate franchise analytics platform that empowers every franchisor and franchisee to achieve more.
Franchise Today will be right back, but first, a word from our sponsors.
Franchise Today is brought to you by Profit Keeper, the #1 franchise analytics platform for franchisors and franchisees, trusted by more than 150 brands and 50,000 franchisees. Profit Keeper connects KPI, benchmark, and royalty data from your locations, groups, and territories. With Profit Keeper, you see stats in real time, presented simply and graphically. This makes it easy to identify actionable information for franchisees to help them drive profitability and brand growth at the unit level. No more wrangling data and guessing what works and what doesn't. To learn more and to get started, visit profitkeeper.com/franchise today. Stephanie Coppedge joined her family in 2002 to start Gideon Math and Reading after teaching math at an Austin, Texas high school. Over the last 20-plus years, she's gained vast experience in all aspects of learning center operations, from the running of their corporate location in Coppedge, Texas, to the development of the Gideon curriculum from some 650 subjects. Franchising since 2012, Stephanie has focused on the onboarding and ongoing support for Gideon Math and Reading franchisees in everything from sales to accounting to marketing. Today, they're 30 units strong and on a great trajectory to continue scaling successfully. They are our Q1 Rising Stars of Franchising, and Stephanie's here to tell us all about it. Stephanie Coppedge, welcome to Franchise Today.
Thank you so much for having me, Stan. I'm super excited.
Well, I'm real excited too. Every year, 4 times over the course of the year, I host a Rising Star of Franchising for that quarter, and proud as I can be to have you filling those shoes for this quarter, Q1 2025. And of course, the Rising Stars of Franchising is brought to you by Profit Keeper.
Well, I'm greatly honored. Thank you so much.
So, Stephanie, even with all those honors and accolades, you don't get to break the rules. The thing we have to do at the very beginning today is what we do every week, is we wind the tape back to the time that you can tell us what it was you were doing when franchising snuck up on you, hit you upside your head, and changed your life forever. What were you doing and when was it?
So we started franchising in 2012. And it was because we had been licensing and we started to have some brand issues in the sense of losing control of what it meant to be Gideon Math and Reading. And so we realized it was finally time we needed to switch into franchising and go full on. We had been trying to do the easier version, as I think many people like to feel like, oh, we'll just license, it'll be easier. But it just creates different problems than when you're franchising.
So 2012, you started doing that. What led to even the licensing of Gideon? What was it in your family or in your conversations with your family that lit the bulb that said, we're going to do this on a bigger scale than just ourselves operating?
Sure. So my mother was actually a franchisee of one of our competitors for many years. And my father and mother really just felt led to start our own brand and start our own thing. So we started that in about 2004. And my father passed pretty quickly after that, and I kind of inherited his role. I had been a high school math teacher before that for a year in Austin after graduating college, and then got pulled into this. And so we started our after school math and learning center, or Math and Reading Center, in about 2004. That's the corporate store, still there, still open. My mom still runs it. And people started seeing what we were doing and kind of wanted to do it too. And so we were extremely relaxed and just kind of gave them the curriculum, gave them some guidelines and said, have fun. And they put our name on the building and we went forward. It was very relaxed back then.
And so how long were you licensing? And how far down the licensing track had you gotten before you switched to a full-blown FDD?
Yes, we licensed from 2004 to about 2011. We took about a year off to get ready for franchising. And I want to say we had gotten to about 20 locations or so back then. Some of them were smaller. Some of them weren't brick and mortar. We might have even had 30, to be honest. It's just been a while since I kept that number counted. But yeah, so we just decided it was time. You know what it really was is in Dallas, we had created kind of a regional brand, and we had quite a few locations here in Dallas, and we wanted it to be knowing everything meant the same thing. When you walked into Gideon, of course, the brand is consistent, and we hadn't achieved that yet. And so that's why one of the big reasons we switched over.
And how many of those original licensees converted to full-blown franchise? Did you lose anyone?
So we actually just grandfathered them in versus forcing them in. So we had one actually convert, and the rest converted upon when they were ready to sell. So we created a situation that you could stay as is, and then when you were ready to sell, it needed to become a franchise in order to stay within the system as Gideon. So most of them, that's how it's occurred. We had some smaller ones, like I said, that just decided, they weren't brick and mortar, that this wasn't for them anymore, and they petered out at one point. So we didn't have a huge conversion, but everybody was able to kind of do what they wanted to do. So the people who wanted to convert could do that. The people who wanted to stay as is, did that. And then we just moved forward only with franchises. We didn't sell the licenses anymore.
So 04 was the beginning of licensing, and 12 was the beginning of franchising. We're at 2025 today with how many units?
So we have 23 open franchises, and we have 30 total units, including our corporate store. So we have another 6 license centers still operating that are still under that model.
And with Boston at the helm doing Fran Dev, what's the goal for 2025?
The goal is another 10. That's what we would like. We have 7 in development. So we'll be hitting 30 regardless by the end of the year, because it takes a while, I'm sure, as you know, with brick and mortar, to get them open these days. So we should be at 30 regardless, but we'd love to have another 10 and maybe have another 3 to 4 open by the end of the year. That's the ideal.
So is Dallas-Fort Worth still the epicenter? Are you still more heavily populated there than elsewhere?
Yes, we really are. And then, of course, Dallas has been growing like crazy the last 5 years, still is. We're having a lot of people move into the area. So sometimes we're kind of even trying to keep up with the neighborhoods. Like, people are wanting to go, oh, I want that neighborhood. The houses aren't even built yet. And I've got people telling me that's where they want to put their second center. So we're having to really map it out and follow the developers as well. But we've got I think we have 20 open in the DFW area. And so our next goal is really to go into Houston and expand into Houston like we've done in Dallas.
So tell us about Gideon Math and Reading and what it is that is unique about the brand. That I feel like that childhood enrichment space has got so many players in it, but there are so many different ways to shape it and things that differentiate, like Jenny with robotics and day schools, daycare, preschool, brick and mortar, no brick and mortar. How many differentiators are there, and what stands apart about Gideon over your direct competition?
So we are brick and mortar after school. We focus on ages 4 to 12, and it's just math and it's just reading. And we start with really strong foundational skills. And we make sure that you have those very solid before we move on. Our mantra is we're wanting to build confidence through academic mastery to make school easy. So you have to go back and solidify anything that was maybe had to be looked at. You had to move on past it in school. Schools are under a schedule, usually set by the state. This isn't even by the teacher. They have to keep moving. I was a high school math teacher. I had about 3 days that were flexible. But at Gideon, we like to say we have the luxury of time. So we can take as long as we need. We can meet each child right where they are, wherever they're starting. And we start them based on performance, not based on age or grade. So kids that are ahead, they can start ahead. And kids that are behind, we can start there and build up. And then the goal is to get beyond grade level, so that you learn things with us before you go to school. So school's more like a review. So some of the main differentiator for us is probably our low ratios. We do a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 students to 1 teacher, and the teacher's sitting right there with them at a horseshoe-shaped table. And then each child has an individually different starting point based on when they came in for their free testing. And then they move through the curriculum at their pace. And there's mastery standards at each step. So, and in order to get into +5s from +4s, you have to hit a certain time and you have to hit a certain number of mistakes or less. And then that tells us, oh, good, the +4s are in long-term memory. We can go on to +5s. We're very step by step. We're not in a hurry. We want to do it right and get things very solid. And the good news is it doesn't take like a whole year to cover a good chunk of the basics for each grade. And we're not trying to cover every single topic ever covered in school. We're supplemental. We're trying to do all the major pieces that'll really move you forward, move the needle, increase your confidence, make you feel like you can handle school really well. We do cover a majority of it, but we're just kind of doing it in a different way. And we're making sure kids get that practice and that confidence, because you cannot give children confidence. That you can only give them the practice so they get the competence themselves, which then gives them the confidence. So that's our big piece, is the foundation.
When you began getting into the business of licensing and franchising and scaling your business, what changes did that bring to the operation of your business? How many hats were you wearing before you began licensing and then franchising? And what caused you to discover that you're going to have more help offloading some of the things that you did before? What was that process like for you? I'm asking you to share that with others in the audience that may be looking ahead to that and haven't gotten there yet. Some lessons learned and some thoughts about that.
Sure. So when we first started, my mother and I both worked at the corporate store, and then we were kind of doing the help for the licenses on the side. We'd have a little script on operations, on sales. It was very loose because I wasn't looking at franchising guidelines or anything like that. We really kind of operated like a vendor would. We printed the booklets, we sold the booklets and shipped them, and we gave some guidance on how to improve the business, but we were a little bit more, very, very hands off, I would say. We did have a short training, like a 3-day training, but we didn't do a whole lot. Then when we moved into franchising, we upped the game a little bit. We created the operations manual, and I really had to step away from being at the corporate store. That was too much. So my mom really handles our corporate store, and then I've gone into franchising, and I'm not really part of the corporate store staff. And then we started to develop more. But to be honest, I didn't even realize how much more support was needed till I joined IFA and I got with CGI and ROS and really started understanding this is how you franchise. I was a little bit ignorant in my own bubble. I was kind of outside the franchising industry and just kind of doing what the regulations told us. Okay, you need to do this, you need to do that. And so we complied with all of that. But best practices, I didn't know and understand until I started going to the conferences and interacting with consultants. And so that really we made a big change in about 2020, kind of moving out of that mindset that like we're a vendor with some controls Now we're more of a franchisor who also operates.
And a great shout out for Art Coley and CGI. Great professionals helping newbies come on board the way that they should instead of sometimes the way that they do. And I think a good part of that has to do with your recognition as a rising star, is that you've come into the business of franchising properly and with deliberation and with intentionality of doing it and doing it right. So how tempting has it been sometimes to refuse a check from somebody that you didn't think might be the right kind of fit for the brand?
It's very easy for me to say no if I do not think they're a good fit, because they will simply be a big problem later on for me. And I still work in operations. So I'm like split between Fran Dev and operations. And my brother Boston is just Fran Dev. And I have a VP of operations, Allison, who's been with me like 15 years in various roles. She's just operations. So I'm the middle, I'm the neutral zone. But I know that if they're not successful because we brought on the wrong person, that honestly, it's super stressful for us in operations. And it's not right to the candidate. It's not right to us. It's just, we're creating a problem simply to sell a franchise. And I am not interested in that at all. So we grew very slowly for a while, simply because we waited for candidates almost to find us and have a strong desire. When we got with Art Coley and CGI, we understood, okay, we need to be learning more about the candidates, and we could bring on more people as we get to know them and make sure they're the right fit. But we just hadn't been in a hurry. We really wanted to make sure we did it right, because that is one thing I understood. Honestly, in licensing, we brought on some of the wrong people, and they've exited since, so it's okay. But they were not good fits for our industry, for our model, work and our culture, all the things. And I kind of learned the lesson in licensing and was lucky enough to be able to implement it as I started franchising.
I often say that the number of units is a lot less important than the numbers produced by the units. And that recurring revenue line is the line that every responsible franchisor ought to be paying attention to. I can understand, though, there are some in the audience that face that temptation and literally need to make payroll. But I think what they're really doing is, as you pointed out so eloquently, is they're taking a down payment on legal fees that they're going to be paying out. And they'll never recover from that, either financially and or culturally. So the juice is just not worth the squeeze, correct?
Correct. Absolutely.
We're talking today with Stephanie Coppedge, CEO of Gideon Math and Reading, where they empower children to pursue their dreams. We've got plenty more to cover, so don't go away.
Franchise Today will be right back. But first, a word from our sponsors.
Franchise Today is brought to you by FRM Solutions, offering the only CRM tool built exclusively for franchising that lets you have it your way. Whether you're a single brand needing professional tools across departments or a portfolio of brands needing franchise-specific CRM across the enterprise. Either way, FRM satisfies the needs of many with the power of one. That's right, one single instance of FRM is all it takes across departments or across brands. So if you've had it with inflexible, one-size-fits-all CRM, end your frustration today. FRM offers robust dashboarding, tailored reporting, and with open APIs, FRM pushes, pulls, and integrates with other databases, providing you with a single source of truth. Don't just take my word for it. Visit them at frmsolutions.com and order up a demo today. And my conversation continues with Stephanie Coppedge, CEO of Gideon Math and Reading. Stephanie, let's talk a minute about COVID and what happened in your world in 2020. How did it impact the business?
Oh, well, like many others, it definitely impacted us. We closed for, 6 weeks, 2 months? I can't remember in Texas. Most of my centers were in Texas. So that was the regulations we were really paying attention to. But as soon as we could open, we did reopen, and we put up, a lot of our centers got like a screen type of situation. Still wasn't ideal because it honestly muted the children speaking, and some of our stuff is oral, but it did help ease everyone's concerns. We did do online. We're not in love with online. It's just not quite the same as it it is in person. We're very much attached to our in-person service. So we did the online as needed, and I think it satisfied everyone's needs. Luckily, we have like a paper product that we could give to people. And so people would come and pick up. We did lots of, at the very beginning, we did massive mailings, of course. But then, so for about March 2020 through end of summer, it just kind of slowly was coming back. It came back a little faster in the fall here in Texas. I'm sure other states it would have been slower. And then we really didn't notice a huge, big change until about June 2021. Then it felt like everybody was ready to come out. And we actually had a big boom because schooling had really suffered during that time, of course, right? Nobody was prepared for entire classrooms to go online, and everybody's shoved into that. And children are behind. The news is not great in math and reading scores. In fact, you'll see that scores are still struggling in both math and reading. We have not fully recovered. I think a lot of people thought we would be fully recovered. I was under the impression, I felt like, no, this is going to be tough. This is a longer go. So it's bittersweet for us. Like we can fill a need that's great in the country. At the same time, it's so hard to see how many children really fell behind during that time. But it definitely affected us. It was a huge blow. Most of us, we didn't have a center closed during COVID. We were able to maintain, and then we slowly regained over the course of a little over a year.
Today, I can't help but ask another question about the youth that are coming up today it was bad enough with boomers and Ys and Zs with technology and losing some of the social skills to the screen. But post-COVID, I've got to believe that when we went to the Zoom world in business and kids started doing at-home schooling or becoming less social, I don't think that they've recovered from that. And I think a lot of us suffer from still not going back to an office or not having gone back to an office sooner, because I think to the point you made in your classrooms, there's nothing that gives you more in terms of benefit and interaction than having interaction live and direct. But where are your thoughts at with today's up-and-comers, and how much of the social soft skills are they losing without programs like yours?
So, we work with ages 4 to 12. So I feel like those children really need to be in person for our type of program. And I think it benefits them to be in person with other children. When those children were online, I heard crazy stories of one kindergarten teacher and 25-year-olds on Zoom. It's a madhouse, right? You're looking, even as an adult, I struggle to focus on all the different faces in my own face on Zoom. But, I've kind of trained myself. I'm an adult, right? But a 5-year-old's not going to train very well. That's a hard thing to do. It's not good to have children on screens that much. So to me, it is imperative that they pull off. And I do think it's a problem. To be honest, though, a lot of people use the iPad kind of a babysitter, and so there's a screen very close. Of course, before that, it was a TV in previous generations. So can't be overly critical, but COVID really pushed us into a normalizing, we're just going to do a ton of screens. But what we've actually found is a lot of parents have kind of a backlash to that. And we are one of the few education franchises that doesn't have an online component currently. And we don't have plans for one. And our parents that come in do not seem to be desiring an online component, working on an iPad, working on a computer. They kind of want to be offline when they come in. Now, is that the person I'm attracting? Could be. Am I just not attracting the parents that are okay with technology? But we don't hear, oh, I can't believe you don't have a component for me to do online later or inside the class. So it's been interesting. On the other side, I will say, this is total tangent, but I have to tell you, since you brought this up, teenagers are not getting their driver's licenses as early as they used to. So when I was 15, I was just counting down the days to get my driver's license.
Right.
What's more free than having your driver's license? My parents even let me drive around the neighborhood to babysit in their car when I was late 15. So it's the day I turned 16, and all of my friends, we went and got our driver's licenses. That's just not the case anymore. I'm sure that's not across the board, but getting your driver's license when you turn 16 has dropped drastically. And they say it's because the children are socializing in their mind at home, online, on their phone. and they don't really have a strong desire to be in person. And that is just the wildest thought to me. And if I had a 16-year-old, I would demand that they go out and get this, because it's such a rite of passage in my mind that they're pushing off to 17 or 18.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of truth to that. What else are you seeing post-COVID that perhaps are changes that were a byproduct of COVID that stayed in place post-COVID? Anything?
Well, definitely the technology. My competitors have gone to a tech-based option. Some of them are going like full tech. Some of them it's a partial option. And that's one thing that I find interesting, and I'm definitely watching. And it's not an option for us, and we don't really believe in it. So we're kind of okay just watching from the sidelines to see how that goes on their side. But definitely children working on tablets, more and more online options for children, programs, even outside of a franchise system, just a straight company offering, something kind of along the lines of Khan Academy, but more sophisticated. Khan Academy was probably one of the big ones to start with, a lot of online lessons. And then there's just been a lot of offshoots of that. And that's what we tell our franchisees is like, you're going to be competing with all kinds of things online. So we need to be different. You got to hold to the mastery standards and the good customer service and things like that. But I'd say, yeah, online's like the biggest piece. To be honest, we've also had to start students a little further back than we used to. We found on the aggregate over the whole, not any particular student, but overall, the students are not starting as high as they used to in our program.
If somebody in the audience, you've mentioned competition twice, but not by name, who would somebody be that you would, if somebody wanted to liken you to something that they would be familiar with, who would a direct competitor be?
Probably Gideon Math and Reading is our largest, most direct competitor. You've got iLevel. They have similarities. Everybody knows Mathnasium. They only do math. We also do reading. Trying to think who else. There's Best Brains. Best Brains is up and coming. I think they're over 100 units. They do math, reading, abacus. They do kind of a variety of things. But I'd say Kumon is like the most direct, but we do a lower ratio. We have a little bit more of a phonics-based program for early readers. We have math word problems. So that's how some of the ways we differentiate from them in particular.
Tell us about the profile of who it is that owns and operates these schools.
So far, it's typically a parent who has experienced wonderful growth with their own child going through our program. We've had essentially raving fans, right? Which happens with a lot of franchises. That's who started. But what's now happening is it's friends or family of someone. And it is a business person who wants to get out of corporate. We have a lot of IT folk who are kind of done being 9 to 5 or longer hours for a corporation. And they're ready to make their own way with their own business. And they just have a real strong drive and passion for education. So they're turning their efforts into small business that way.
Before we turn the final corner, and I ask you for contact info, Stephanie, what perhaps have I not asked you today that you're sitting there wishing I did?
I wish I had gotten a franchise consultant like you, Stan, back in the day to really tell me you want to set it up this way. And then everyone's expectations are on the same page, because I've had to change people's expectations a couple times along this journey. And it's the right way to do it moving forward, but it's been some hard conversations.
How do people find you again, Stephanie, when they want to learn more after hearing this today?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn for sure, Stephanie Coppedge. You can email me, Stephanie@GideonFranchise.com. Welcome to come to GideonFranchise.com and submit contact. At the very least, we've got a website for you.
Well, I'm proud of what you're doing. I'm proud of how you're doing it. I'm proud of who you're doing it with help from people like CGI. And it makes me more than proud to call you our rising star of franchising for Q1 2025, with thanks to Profit Keeper for making that program possible. So Stephanie, really, really keeping an eye on you going forward, and hope to have you back here as an Entrepreneur of the Year sometime down the road, not too far.
Oh, that'd be amazing. I'm honored enough to be rising star. This is very exciting. So thank you so much for this honor, Stan.
It's a real pleasure having you here and helping the audience learn that you are out there, and there are people that have learned how to do it the right way early on, and you're just building a great foundation for the future. So it'll be interesting to watch your growth.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Stephanie Coppedge, CEO of Gideon Franchising, Math and Reading. Thanks again for being here. Well, that's a wrap for today. Next week, we're joined by Daryl Dollinger, a guy that was part of the team that created Moe's Southwest Grill, Planet Smoothie, Doc Green's Gourmet Salads, and Shane's Rib Shack. Today, Daryl is co-founder and president of Big Game Brands, franchisors of the Flying Biscuit Cafe and Monkey Joe's. Daryl Dollinger, right here next week on Franchise Today. Until then, I'm Stan Friedman wishing you the best, the very best of all things franchising. And Franchise Today is out.
Franchise Today is a production of FRM Solutions, providing best-in-class CRM tools to empower relationships with prospective and existing franchisees. Find them online at frmsolutions.com. Join Stan every Wednesday at noon Eastern for another episode of Franchise Today. Or, as always, download episodes on demand at blogtalkradio.com